Interesting. I was supposed to go and actually see the head of one of the early American Bitcoin exchanges, and I ended up like sending a colleague instead. And I went to a different conference instead. Probably the most expensive conference decision. The person I sent came back and said, "Oh, there's nothing here. They're smoking crack." That was $4 a Bitcoin. When I finally got it, it was 120. Still early, but next another 30x would have been nice.
Thank you for doing this, sir. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
To start with, can you please tell me your name and what you do?
Sure. I'm Michael Terpin, and I am the founder and CEO of Transform Ventures and the author of Bitcoin Supercycle.
All right. Yeah, we're going to get into that. Before we get into that, can you please tell me how you got into Bitcoin and crypto?
Sure. So I've spent my whole career looking at new industries, and I get this, so I have the blessing and the curse of getting into things early. I got very excited about the internet in the early 1990s, started a business in 1992, and launched a product in 94. And I remember in 93 looking around to see who else was doing business in the internet. It was like literally you could count it on a couple of hands. And, sold that business, which became the first internet-based press release distribution service, Internet Wire, which then became Market Wire, and it's now Globe News Wire, and it's a $500 million entity.
Very, very cool. Just a little color on that follow-up question. What was your process for recognizing that the internet was going to become something transformational?
Well, I was familiar with the internet before the web. I saw it in the university type thing, and it was very raw. It was like very geeky. And then before the web, they had things like Finger and Archie and Veronica and FTP transfers. But all of a sudden, when you end up having the web, and you could go, and I was familiar because in the early 90s, it was still a new thing to move from sneakernet to like local area networks, wide area networks. This seemed like it's the worldwide network, right? So in other words, all of a sudden I got it that if you used to be able to type, Z drive and you would access a computer across the hall. Well, by going www.louvre.fr, you all of a sudden looked at a painting in Louvre in France, sitting in Marina del Rey, California. That to me was mind blowing.
Okay.
And I saw it was going to change the world.
Very, very cool.
I had the same feeling when I saw the first social network, and I had the same feeling when I saw Bitcoin.
Okay, yeah, so that's where I wanted to go next. When and how did you come into contact with Bitcoin?
So I had heard about it from about, early 2012 on.
Okay.
And I thought it was just like a video game, or I was, working with companies who were doing virtual lives and trading skins. And I'd heard about it. It was interesting. I was supposed to go and actually see the head of one of the early American Bitcoin exchanges, TradeHell, and I ended up like sending a colleague instead because I was interested and curious to see if there's anything real there. And I went to a different conference instead, probably the most expensive conference decision ever, because if I had gone in April of 2012, I would have had the same reaction I did in May of 2013. Oh my God, it's going to change the world. The person I sent came back and said, "Oh, there's nothing here. They're smoking crack."
Oh, wow.
And but I would have, had the same reaction, said this is going to change the world. But that was $4 a Bitcoin. When I finally got it, it was 120. It was still early, but next another 30x would have been nice.
I see. And you've been in crypto ever since, or
yes,
in Bitcoin and crypto.
In fact, I basically made the decision in 2013 to stop working on everything else.
Right, I see. So I'm a little unfamiliar with your kind of core ethos about Bitcoin and crypto. Are you mostly focused on Bitcoin, or does it encompass things outside of Bitcoin?
Sure. So I call myself a Bitcoin preferentialist.
Okay.
So I'm not a maxi. I definitely believe in a multi-chain future. I think that many chains do things better than Bitcoin. Nothing is as good for sort of store value, and you're not going to go and have Dogecoin as a something that is running a government, right?
Yeah.
None of them are going to compare, at least for the foreseeable future, with the sort of decentralized, immutable nature of Bitcoin. Even Ethereum, I mean, Vitalik has said, hey, I'm in charge, right? And he did have it forked once, and that was a decision he could make. There is no Satoshi, hanging over Bitcoin. He basically created it, open sourced it, and it's now, I mean, to make even minor changes, like you'll recall when, the fork happened, right? I mean, obviously, Roger was very involved in that. And, it took several years to basically be able to get the fees down from like $20 to like 20 cents through SegWit. And that you had to, I mean, it was built in, you had to have like a 95% agreement among 9 miners. And then the devs had to agree with that decision. And so it's really difficult to add things on Bitcoin. And that's a blessing and a curse. It's a curse for, rapid innovation, but it's a blessing for stability.
Yeah. So one follow-up question on that: do you foresee kind of a fight coming to Bitcoin in the near future? As in, like, I get a sense that there's going to be another kind of battle about Bitcoin's future in terms of like a soft fork or a hard fork, like
Well, there's continual, minor forks, right?
Yeah.
And other than Bitcoin Cash and to a lesser extent, the Bitcoin Satoshi, SV.
Yeah.
None of them have been successful.
Yeah.
I mean, Bitcoin Diamond, whatever,
I mean, in terms of like getting protocol changes done for Bitcoin,
Well,
it feels like it hasn't been really.
Well, Taproot came through, and
Yeah.
everybody kind of agreed that was a good thing.
Yeah.
And so I think that the ones that I think the SegWit war, and it was a war,
Yeah.
kind of proved that, if you just go through the proper channels before you, present your Bitcoin improvement proposals, that has a good chance of going through. And it goes through slowly, and that's probably a good thing.
Okay.
And now that you got like a Bitcoin layer 2, you're able to innovate on top of that without asking for permission.
Yeah. I feel like that's where the next conflict is going to go. Is around like.
I'm not sure, but I think the next conflict is going to be on the governmental level.
Oh yeah.
For example, right now, I mean, we're sitting here, last day of WAGMI, and we've had several executive orders by Donald Trump. And one of the more controversial ones was he had promised at Bitcoin Nashville that there was going to be an executive order for a Bitcoin strategic reserve. Instead, he just said there's going to be a presidential committee to study a strategic reserve of digital assets. Now, he did put Cynthia Lummis in charge of it.
Yeah.
And she's a Bitcoin maxi. And she's proposed a Bitcoin strategic reserve so that the U.S. had as much of the world's supply of Bitcoin as they did of gold, about 5%.
Yeah.
That would involve them, buying almost 1 million Bitcoin over a few years.
Yeah.
And so that's great, but people saw digital assets and said, oh no, Ripple has gone and donated enough money that they're going to get included in it.
Yeah.
And so I think the controversies between chains are going to be where the wars are fought, and it'll be fought on the governmental level. I mean, thankfully, we no longer have the Elizabeth Warren war on crypto.
Yeah, I mean,
and we have to be guarded, though, because, again, there is a midterm election coming up in 2 years, right?
Yeah.
And they only have the House by 2 votes. And in my book, Bitcoin Supercycle, I talk about, 2 things. I talk about what I call the 4 seasons of Bitcoin. So this book is really written for 2 audiences. One is for Bitcoin maxis to show that you actually can get more Bitcoin at the end of the day if you don't hodl forever, but you actually hold Bitcoin for 3 years and then hold cash for 1 year. Because it's very predictable after what I call Bitcoin summer. Spring is when the halving happens. Bitcoin summer is the day that you pass the all-time high of the prior cycle. Then it shoots up like a rocket. And when it pops, that's when you need the dollar cost average into cash. Hold it for a year. And every cycle so far, you get a lot more Bitcoin by then buying it at the bottom.
I see.
And so if your goal at the end of the day is to have more Bitcoin, that's the way to do it.
Okay, let's talk about the book.
Sure.
So Bitcoin Supercycle. Supercycle, that's a loaded word in crypto.
I understand. And I originally had this book called The 4 Seasons of Bitcoin, and the publisher didn't like it.
Okay.
It's distributed by Simon & Schuster. It's Skyhorse Publishing. And so I said, well, I'm going to talk a little bit about why I believe this cycle is going to start a super cycle, though. Oh, that's a great word. And yes, I know it's loaded, Dan Held talked about a super cycle 4 years ago and thought COVID was going to cause Bitcoin to shoot up to 800,000. That didn't happen. And the actual first usage of a Bitcoin super cycle was about a year or two earlier. And someone had talked about a Bitcoin and Litecoin super cycle. To me, I use two definitions of super cycle.
Okay.
One is a technology super cycle, and the other one is a commodity super cycle. Bitcoin is not a security. That's been pretty much decided. And it's not really a collectible. It's a commodity, and it's fungible, and it has the same kind of aspects of other commodities like gold.
Yeah.
So it will be defined as a commodity in the future, and the CME basically had written reports that I quote in the book about there being sort of three super cycles in the commodities market in the last, say, 50 years.
Okay.
One of them was in the 70s when gold, was taken off of the backing to the dollar.
Yeah.
And then they re-legalized after 40 years the ability for Americans to own gold. And that quadrupled the price.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a super cycle. Super cycle, going back to the Elliott vision, the Elliott curve from the 30s, of a grand super cycle lasting centuries, super cycles lasting at least 5 years.
Okay.
And then smaller cycles going down to like minute by minute cycles. And even though the Bitcoin 4-year cycles do not follow the Elliott wave specifically, the super cycle effect is based really on the addition of the technology super cycle, where any new technology that gets massive adoption tends to go through what they call an S curve.
Yeah.
Right. And so it may take 10, 15, 20 years for you to get past the early crazy people, the early adopters. And, the same thing is written about in slightly different terms in the Gartner hype cycle and in Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm, Inside the Tornado, books like that. So you end up having what the early adopters want is not what the early mainstream wants.
It's also, I think, the mainstream, it's too difficult or...
Well, they want safety.
Yeah, exactly.
They want to see not that their crazy brother-in-law has it, but that their mom has it, right? And there's safety in numbers.
Yeah.
And so, the early Bitcoiners, basically said, we don't want any government, we don't want any regulation. This is freedom money. And that's scary to, ma and pa kettle, right? They're like, no, I want the government to protect me. I want to make sure this is a FDIC insured or whatever.
Well, also, if I'm off by like one letter, I don't want to lose all my money.
Correct.
Kind of thing. Like that's not tenable for my mom.
Yeah, and
Or it is though, right?
but volatility is what causes wealth, right? And so there's very rarely an asset that's both a store of value and something where you can gain exponential growth. And Bitcoin's unique in that. Obviously some other digital assets, Ethereum turned out to be that way, but it wasn't, let's say, born that way.
Okay. Yeah.
And again, obviously with Bitcoin, you had to be a true believer in the beginning. And Satoshi recognized that. He's like, we're going to go and give, almost half of the rewards to the miners for the first 4 years, because they had no idea where it was going to go.
Yeah.
They're spending time and expertise that they have to learn, and money for electricity to run something on a laptop.
Yeah.
That might burn out their laptop.
Yeah.
And they ended up, holding it, becoming very wealthy, or selling it went up 10x from a penny to a dime.
Yep. And then, people along the way cashed out after a 10x.
Well, there's a saying that people get Bitcoin at the price they deserve.
I like it. All right, so I just want to go back a little bit to make sure I understand what the super cycle is.
So the super cycle in Bitcoin
based off of 4
specifically,
seasons.
Well, the 4 seasons is within each cycle.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And so the 4 seasons, I call them Bitcoin Spring, which is the day of the halving, right?
Yeah.
Because that's when the seed of the new cycle is planted. We are now in the 5th cycle out of 33.
Right, okay.
And there will be 33 cycles, and then there will be no more new Bitcoin.
Right.
There'll still be fees. There'll still be people mining.
Yeah.
They're going to mine for fees. And you may have $50 million Bitcoin at that point, so it's worth it. And if it's not worth it, then it goes back to home miners again. Someone will always want to mine Bitcoin, as long as it has some value. And it's not going to go back to 0.1% anytime soon, or probably never. So basically, Bitcoin spring, you would think that it would go up when the halving happens, but it goes sideways.
Yeah.
Because there are two competing economic forces. The positive force is that you know that every cycle there's more scarcity, and as long as there's the same amount of users or more, and it's been more, price has to go up.
Yeah.
However, the thing that counteracts that is the fact that miners have to sell to keep the lights on.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so it's amazing how that's basically led in a flat period.
Yep.
This cycle, this fifth cycle here after the fourth halving, you basically had a situation where the halving was at 63,900. 6 months later, it was still about 64,000.
Yeah.
And it was only in the last month that it started creeping up a little bit to approach the last cycle's high.
Yep.
Which until the last month, it looked like that cycle's high was going to be 68,000 roughly. But no, a month before the halving, you had this, kind of pump that happened when the enthusiasm of the passage and then going live and then getting adopted of the ETFs, pushed it all the way up to almost 74,000.
Yep.
And a lot of pundits, and I thought deeply because that was right about the time I was wrapping up the book.
Okay.
And a lot of pundits were saying, "Oh, cycles are over now."
Seriously?
Well, because they said summer happened before spring. Or they didn't call it that's my term, but they said the all-time high happened before the halving. No more cycles.
I see.
Or they said it's a left-facing cycle. That's what Benjamin Cohen said. And it's going to be a shorter cycle. And I'm thinking, I said, why would we expect? How can the high of this cycle occur last cycle?
Yeah.
And so I put my neck out and said in the book that is the high of last cycle, even though it happened after capitulation. So that's the anomaly. But it actually brought it up closer to where it should have been because 100x, 30x should have been 10x last cycle because of all that headwinds from the Biden campaign against crypto, from the rapid escalation of interest rates. You had macro effect tamper it down to only 7.8 x the halving price. And the last month, it got up to 9x, closer to 10x, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's about where it should have been. But then the halving went right back down to where it's always been at the halving, which is the fair price of Bitcoin.
Right, okay.
And it's neither overbought nor oversold. And it stayed that way for 6 months. Now, you know that it's interesting. The shortest of the 4 seasons is always spring.
Okay.
The longest is always winter. Winter's averaged 18 months. Spring is only averaged 6 months. The other 2 seasons average about a year.
Interesting.
And so
summer is where you see the most price appreciation?
Parabolic growth.
Yeah.
And so far, 4 out of 4, the very day that you pass the cycle's last high, in this case, 73,850, it goes off like a rocket ship. When it passed $30 after the first halving, that was the high of the pre-halving cycle, it ended up going to 250 within a couple of weeks and ended up a year at 1,200.
Yeah.
And when you then had the next cycle, it had to pass 1,200, and then it ended up going off in a couple of months and going up to 19,800.
Yeah.
And then end of 2020, when it ended up, May having Bitcoin summer starting in December, when it passed $20,000, it tripled in 4 months.
Yeah.
And so it was not a surprise that I projected in the book, which I projected before the book came out. I mean, the book came out I finished writing in August. I said, if Trump wins, we will have the Bitcoin summer happen in early November. And if Kamala wins, the macro will be not as good. You'll still have an anti-crypto, kind of feel. And Elizabeth Warren will still be in power. They may not renew Gary Gensler, but it'll be a similar type of vibe. Is that you'll still have a new all-time high, but it'll probably be end of December. And sure enough, Trump won and hit the all-time high that day. And within 4 weeks, we're at 100,000.
Yeah, right. Cool. Very, very cool. All right. Let's talk a little bit about the companies that you mentioned earlier. Transform Group and BitAngels.
Well, Transform Ventures is the umbrella company.
Okay. All right.
Transform Ventures has several different divisions. As Transform Ventures, I have a venture studio. So I've incubated companies. One is called Blockchain Wire, which I sold majority interest in. And it's now being operated by Alpha Transform Holdings, which I'm a partner in. And then I also have an ESG sort of a carbon trading marketplace called Open Carbon.
Okay.
That I brought in David Jensen, who's the former head of digital for Ernst & Young. He, started the blockchain practice and brought in Paul Brody from IBM, where he worked with him as a colleague to run that. He grew the sustainability practice, and so now he's CEO of that group, and it's doing very well. And then I also do a lot of advisory work and investing, and so I've got about 25 companies in my current portfolio.
Okay. And so Transform Ventures is basically the overall mandate of it is investing in crypto. Is it?
It's all crypto, yes.
Sorry.
It's all crypto, yes.
Okay. Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit how you pick and choose what you decide to
Sure.
go into?
I look at different narratives. Right now, decentralized AI is my main narrative.
Yeah.
And I also look for great teams where I think I can be helpful. And so I'll usually go in and write a check. I'll also help with marketing. Transform Group is the PR firm.
Okay.
So that was the original Transform. I named it when I first got into crypto, and we were the only PR firm in crypto for about the first 3 years until I really got a bona fide competitor. Now there's half a dozen really good firms and 100 firms that are trying to climb up the position. But those first few years, I got to do the launch PR for Tether, for Ethereum at this very conference 11 years ago.
Very cool.
And a number of other iconic projects. Augur, which came in the bear market of 2015. And Bancor and Gnosis and Golem and Neo and Wax and we continue to work with great companies. Our current client list includes CoreDAO, which I'm also an advisor to. Shiba Inu we've been working with for several years now. Worked with other top kind of meme coins this cycle, including Brett. Really ran Brett since they really just started up. $2 billion and
base meme coin.
Yeah, and so I'm excited about investing and advising both interesting memes and then primarily decentralized AI. I think that's the real big narrative this cycle.
Yeah, I agree. AI in crypto is huge this cycle. Can you tell me your thoughts on this and anything within that you find particularly interesting? For example, how do you feel about this whole agentic AI KOLs thing? Pick and shovel plays like virtuals or
Well, those are two of the big winners the last couple months.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I actually met the founder of virtuals in October at a conference, a decentralized AI one-day conference that was right before permissionless. And I think they're about a $4 million valuation. There are about 30 projects in the room, right? Several which I invested in. And I listened to this panel. I was just like, not really sure this is going to work that well. I'll maybe keep in touch. And, and then boom, all of a sudden they're $5 billion.
Yeah.
And so obviously they were onto something. And basically, it's not just scarcity, it's revenue. And they've done like $50-60 million in fees for creating things on that platform. And Eliza, I'm actually working now with several projects that are using Eliza, which came off of AI 16Z, which I was actually offered the opportunity to get in when it was $3 million on DAOs.fun. And it was presented to me as this is a wildly risky kind of innovative meme coin. And I passed. It was $2 billion 2 months later.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm wide awake now in that space. I basically thought that the future was going to be built on Morpheus and BitTensor, and I'm an early investor in Morpheus. And they'll do well too. But right now, the fastest moving high risk, high reward category is sort of these, agentic AI. I'm an early investor in Wire Network, which has done extremely well, and also the spin-off wallet company that I'm one of the main investors in. And then I've got current portfolio company that are all kind of that agentic area and different things. I had several of them presenting at Angel's VIP event last night. Matterfi is one of them. Another one is Alpha Liquid Terminal with the AltX token. This is actually Enzo Milani, who is the former chief strategy officer at NASDAQ.
Oh, cool.
Who I've done a lot of work with over the years. I brought him into crypto 10 years ago.
Cool.
And he's building a real great platform that'll let people use a Bloomberg-style terminal, because Bloomberg terminals, they only have 5 coins listed on them.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana.
No, they don't have Solana.
Really?
Yeah, they've got the Bitcoin Cash,
Ethereum,
Litecoin,
Okay.
Dogecoin, and Ripple. That's it.
Good Lord.
Yeah, I mean, and I think Ethereum, but 5 or 6, that's it.
Yeah.
And it's like they didn't update the code since like 2018. And
Wow. Surprising.
Obviously, it's a much faster moving space, and we think that agentic AI is going to have 30 or 40 or 50 valuable programs that we can sort of just link and integrate amongst each other.
Yeah.
And so your agents will be talking to each other. You'll decide which ones to utilize, and you'll also have a keyboard that gives you greater access along with the token. And so that'll be launching fundraising now. That'll be launching in the next couple months. Another one that I'm chairman of is and the lead investor in is called AI Quant Labs.
I think I've heard of that.
Yeah, that's new. It basically is built on ELIZA, and it's going to let people look through all of the tokens that are coming out in the microcap and the small cap arena, which is like on Solana alone, it's like 30 every minute.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And it'll go and analyze them in real time, and it'll tell you when things that are interesting. And you set the parameters, and you have a sliding bar, and you can go and trade on that. And then once your trading becomes successful and it's noted in the platform, people can go and invest in your strategy. And then once your token, because you can issue a token from this, and like virtuals, AIQs, the token will get a piece of that, and the trading fees. And once you get to about a $250,000 market cap, we auto launch it on Dex Screener as a standalone token.
Oh, cool.
And unlike all the tokens that are launched on virtuals that do nothing other than let you post away or something like that, or like rag on someone, or like have a dancing avatar that you can make fun of. This one actually lets you go and buy into or launch your own trading strategies, and so we think it's going to be very valuable.
Very, very cool. All right. Last question for you. What's your prediction for the market in general for this year in Bitcoin
Sure.
and crypto?
So I'll go back to the book now.
Please.
Okay. So we have seen across the cycles, again, more and more predictable behavior every time. What I call Bitcoin summer starts the day after the halving. Again, shortest season. This time it was 7 months. It's the longest it's ever been. And it's, again, this 4 to 7 month, period of time. And it's typically summer then is less than a year. Been historically about 9 to 11 months, getting a little longer each time. But that's because the halvings get earlier, but the all-time highs are within, so far, a narrow 37-day period.
Really?
That's it.
Wow.
I don't know why I'm the only one writing about this, but the first all-time high, peak of Bitcoin summer was December 4th of 2013. That's the year after the halving, December 4th. The second one was year after the halving, December 17th.
Wow.
And the third one was year after the halving, November 10th.
Wow.
37-day period. And then Bitcoin fall, which basically starts, and it's always been the third year of crypto, because you have again, 6-7 months followed by about a year. It ends up being that the bubble pops going into the third year. In the 16 years of Bitcoin, there's only 3 years you could have lost money. Despite all the wild volatility, you lost money for a full year in 2014, 2018, 2022, and you'll probably lose it in 2026. Because the crazy bubble will pop this year, retail FOMO in. And what's interesting is the third year is also the year of the midterms. And the halvings have always been presidential years. And so if the Republican Party doesn't watch out, they only have the House by 2 seats.
Yeah.
If they're able to run an anti-crypto campaign against people who are pro-crypto and gain like 3 seats, I guarantee you they're going to, first thing the House does in 26 or comes into office in 27 is start impeachment proceedings on Trump because, he lost too many people money on and all this loose crypto regulation. We're going to shut it down.
Or his meme coin.
We're going to go after his meme coin.
Yeah.
They've already, it won't go anywhere because they control the House, but they've already said they want to launch an investigation of the World Liberty because it has too much Chinese influence because Justin Sun invested in it.
Oh, man, that's so...
Yeah, so again, it's very... kind of continuation of lawfare.
Yeah, it's sad. That's depressing to me. Yeah.
So, but crypto goes on.
Yeah.
And again, these cycles are very predictable, and by understanding the cycles, you can win because again, you can if you invested $12,000 at the end of 2012, it's only 12 years ago, and you hodled it the whole time, you'd have about 105 million today.
That's amazing.
However, if you went through the Bitcoin, the 4 seasons of Bitcoin strategy, and you ended up selling near the top, just cost average out during that period of time, you didn't hit 1,200, you hit 1,000. Then you held in cash for 1 year, and you bought near the bottom. Bottom was 175. You bought around 250. Several months to get at that price. You would end up having now 1,000 Bitcoin at 105. Actually, now $106,000 per coin. You would have 64,000 Bitcoin.
It's wild.
And over $6 billion.
Yeah.
And so that's the lessons that I preach in there. And the Supercycle is simply that at some point, because we're only 4 or 5% of the world population involved, and the S curve is going to take us to 80%,
right?
Probably in the next 12 years. That means that at some point you have to reverse the diminishing returns. Right now, I'm projecting that the neutral macro would be 3x the halving, about 190,000.
Okay.
You can go plus or minus about 25% without disrupting the cycle behavior. That's about 250,000. But if all of a sudden we hit 300, 350, that's the start of a super cycle.
I see. I understand. All right. Sorry. One last follow-up question.
Sure.
Sorry. Would I be correct in saying that altcoins peak in Bitcoin fall, like in the seasons?
No. So I have 4 chapters on altcoins. I think 3 or 4 chapters on altcoins, and literally I apologize at the end of the chapter before Ethereum. I say, if you're a Bitcoin max, you can skip the next 4 chapters and then go to the again, I respect that community. But if you're brave enough to consider other alternatives, I'm primarily Bitcoin in my holdings, but I do realize that I'm in the game. I get a lot of alpha, right? So I'm willing to go and Solana is going to probably outperform Bitcoin this cycle, and in certain without a lot of risk. And meanwhile, there's little coins that can go 100x. You've had virtuals go 1,000x, right? So, but the highest level of risk. So you have to decide: do you want a job? Because if you're managing this, that's a job. If you're basically just doing the Bitcoin Supercycle 4 seasons of Bitcoin approach, you literally only have to wake up twice every 4-year cycle. Okay. And set it and forget it the rest of the time.
I see.
But no, I think that altcoins typically
they lag, right?
They lag.
They lag.
So
Bitcoin's
they usually kind of come in. Memes come in near the beginning of the cycle, and then they rage at the very end of the cycle. Because what a lot of the whales do is they'll, kind of get out near the top when retail's fumbling to get in, and then all of a sudden they'll put in stable coin, and then they'll go and pump whatever they're interested in getting a higher return on, and so they'll go into Ethereum, they'll go into Solana or whatever, and then the last gasp of the cycle, they'll pump some crazy coins, right? I mean, last time it was Doge, right? And then all of a sudden you get some crazy high, completely unknown coin going to $30 billion or something, and then the drop stops. And when the bubble pops, most people don't realize until it's too late. And that's why you have to really be careful at that. Again, very predictable. All the lows have been between mid-December and a couple months after that.
Yeah.
So it's a very narrow cycle for the top and a very narrow cycle for the bottom.
Okay. Well, I appreciate it very much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right.